Alright, so the wait is over. His highly anticipated Shady debut finally hit the streets. Now, of course, this hasn't been the first full-length debut from Conway the Machine, as he released the nearly flawless From King to a God album in 2020 and the very solid La Machina the following year. But God Don't Make Mistakes serves as his first major label debut. It's been discussed for what feels like about 2 years now. In spite of some delays, we finally got the finished product. So a week before this release, Conway had blessed fans with a Dat Piff mixtape entitled Greetings Earthlings. It contained brand new Conway verses over commercial singles, a lot of them trap influenced. On the project, Conway gave us endless flows and intricate rhyme schemes. He was in his bag, having some fun while promoting the album. And if you didn't get a chance to hear this drop, do yourselves a favor and go check it out, because he was definitely rapping his ass off. But that brings us to this Shady Records debut, which has production from Derringer, Beat Butcher, Hit Boy, Bink, Justice League, Cosmo, and Alchemist. It contains 12 tracks and lasts approximately 48 minutes. Now, in terms of the features, he enlists Benny the Butcher, Westside Gunn, Love the Genius, Jay Skees, Beanie Sigel, Jill Scott, Kelly Price, Keisha Plum, Wallow 267, T.I., Novel, Lil Wayne, and Rick Ross. But with that being said, let me go ahead and hit y'all with this track-by-track breakdown. The opener, Lockload, produced by Derringer and Beat Butcher, has a murky, moody, and eerie instrumental. Now, as far as Derringer production is concerned, I thought this was just serviceable. Sure, it's tense and kicks things off in a cinematic enough way, but I didn't find it to be an overly memorable beat. Conway came through with a solid verse, but Beanie Sigel's performance was barely audible. It's sad and frustrating that this Philly legend hasn't been able to get his voice back after getting shot in 2015. This situation reminds me a lot of what happened with the great DOC back in the 90s. However, I think the engineer could have done a better job with Beanie's vocals in spite of his voice complications. So on paper, I love that Conway recorded a song with Beanie Sigel, but I thought this was just an okay record. Track 2, Tear Gas, featuring Lil Wayne and Rick Ross, has a sullen and gloomy soundscape from Cosmo and G Coupe. The atmospheric vocal sample and pianos feels very Maybach music inspired. Here, Conway talks trying to stay afloat in spite of PTSD and betrayal. He delivered a solid enough verse, but it was ultimately Lil Wayne who stole the show as he continues on his hot streak of impressive feature verses. But Rick Ross's verse was bland and snooze-worthy. It's very rinse, wash, repeat Rick Ross. As a whole, this wasn't an awful song, but it was just a little too melancholy to have as a second track, especially after such a moody intro. Now, track 3, Piano Love, produced by The Alchemist, is where I feel the album truly begins. As the first single, this was released back in 2021, but it has high replay value and manages to still be one of the best songs on the album. You know, this is the kind of production that I think many Griselda heads love to see from The Alchemist. It has all the ingredients of a gritty Conway banger. The following, Drumwork, is a posse cut with Conway's artists Jay Skees and Love the Genius. Instrumentally, the Derringer production does feel like a leftover from the Griselda What Would Sheen Gun Do project. It's a desolate, moody, and mid-tempo slice of boom bap. It's very minimalistic and overcast. It's not that I dislike this track, but I could have used a brighter or livelier beat, especially considering the gloomy start of the album. That being said, it is a bar-heavy song in a similar vein to tracks like Crack in the 90s and Sister Abigail, in that Jay Skees and Love the Genius showcase their skill sets. These two new artists are lyricists through and through, and I enjoy their inclusion on Conway projects, but unfortunately I was not blown away by this track. The subsequent record, Wild Chapters, featuring T.I. and Novel, had potential, but I would consider it to be the weakest link by far. While I found the Hit Boy production to be knocking enough, the hook from Novel failed to ring out, and the T.I. verse was rather mid. I was also confused as to who thought it was a good idea for Novel to rap the third verse. You mean to tell me that Conway couldn't have doubled back after T.I.? Was it really essential for Novel to close out this track? Furthermore, I don't really get the interest that Griselda has in Novel anyway, as he was featured on the WCD album and most fans disliked that part. Yeah, this track was a clunky mess. Thankfully, things pick up with the Bink and Beat Brothers produced track Guilty, which has a gospel-inspired soul sample, pensive keys, and background vocals from Kelly Price. On this gem of a record, Conway vividly recalls getting shot and developing Bell's palsy. It's deep and autobiographical lyricism from the machine, and one of the highlights from the album. The following John Woo flick is a menacing banger produced by Derringer, featuring all three members of Griselda. Now, this was released a few weeks back, so folks might have played it out or perhaps taken it for granted as a result. But it's a dope-ass record where all three Griselda members do what they do best over a gritty Derringer instrumental. I mean, what's not to like? Right after, we get Stressed, which has immaculate production from Derringer that's spacious and on the morose side. This features Conway at his most vulnerable and transparent as he speaks on battling depression, the death of his son, his cousin's suicide, and having to drink away the pain. His lyricism is honest, emotionally compelling, and heartfelt. The hook goes pretty hard too, and I think this track will go over well with a broader audience given the relatable theme, since a lot of folks are going through it right now. Conway raps, "And not a day goes by where I don't sip my liquor, where I don't roll one and twist my swisher. Thought I was helping with the pain, but I'm just getting sicker. Alcoholism is a sickness. How many people gonna admit they addicted?" It's real talk as Conway faces his demons and hopefully inspires others to take a real look in the mirror and to self-reflect. But there's light at the end of the tunnel as Wallow 267 provides some motivational words at the end. But yeah, this was a great introspective track with impressive Derringer production. Then we get the Justice League produced So Much More, which is built around a lush and hypnotic vocal loop. It's a cool enough beat, but Conway's lyricism was the strong suit here, as he was talking his talk while also advising the critics to view him as more than just a rapper. He's a self-made businessman, record label owner, motivator of the streets, and a philanthropist. And Conway goes more in depth discussing how he gave back to his hood and the homeless during COVID, but the media didn't cover that. Conway also states, "I don't have to sell my soul to sell records. I wrote some of the illest verses ever and shifted the culture, but I'll probably never get the credit." So this is what inspires him to keep going so hard, even though Griselda accomplished so much already. Immediately after is Chanel Pearls featuring Jill Scott, set to an atmospheric, smooth, but pensive instrumental. Conway has a solid verse rapping about loyalty and day one love, but it was Jill Scott who had the most dynamic performance. Not only was she singing the hook, but she gave us a dope 16. Who would have thought Jill Scott would have come through with the bars? But yeah, this was another high point on the album. The penultimate track is Baba's featuring Griselda's first lady, Keisha Plum, who does her standard but chilling spoken word, this time on top of an organ-backed beat with guitars and off-kilter drums. Sonically, this feels very West Side Gun-esque. While this record wasn't mind-blowing, it was solid, and I enjoyed Conway's flow switch up. Then the album wraps up with the poignant God Don't Make Mistakes, which some might consider as the Cow Part 2. It's a track that puts the capital I and introspection as Conway gets autobiographical and shares his powerful story with the world. And this is built around a beautiful and meditative Alchemist instrumental. It's a perfect way to close things out, and it shows Conway's knack for reflective lyricism. Overall, I give this album a rating of a strong 3.5 mics. Was this the epic debut that many fans had hoped for? Probably not, but it's still a dope release that shows Conway's growth and depth as a lyricist. On previous projects, Conway had given us glimpses of introspection and personal storytelling, but on this album, he clearly made it more of a focus. It's also on this album where Conway is at his most vulnerable and comfortable with peeling back the layers. So from a lyrical and thematic perspective, I feel he delivered in a big way. With that being said, I did have a few issues, one being the sequencing, as I felt the album really didn't take off until about track 3 with Piano Love. Then it cooled down for a bit and didn't pick up until Guilty, track 6. So, in my opinion, the second half was stronger than the first leg. I also didn't love all of the features equally. While I liked Lil Wayne's, Benny's, Westside Gunn's, Love the Genius, Jay Ski's, and Jill Scott's performances, I didn't really care for Rick Ross's, T.I.'s, Novels, and Beanie Sigel's part. Well, for Beanie's, it was only because we couldn't hear him. In addition, I found some of the production to be a little too downcast and moody. Now, not that that is inherently a bad thing, but there was a much darker and grayer tone than what was found on projects like From King to a God and La Machina. Both of those records offered more of a sonic variety and more balanced instrumentation overall, which makes for more of an enjoyable listen for me, that is. Also, given Shady's sample restrictions, I wouldn't be surprised if portions of the album had to be redone multiple times. It might explain the poor sequencing. So despite those issues, I am glad that this project got to see the light of day so that Conway can move on to bigger and better things outside of Shady and, yes, sadly, Griselda. Although I hope that this project does well for Conway and that it gives him the exposure that a powerhouse label like Shady has the potential to do. My favorite tracks include Piano Love, Guilty, John Woo Flick, Stressed, Chanel Pearls, and God Don't Make Mistakes. Let me know what you thought about this album in the comment section below. It's your boy Mixtape Moth. I'm signing out, but be sure to hit that like button and please subscribe. As always, it's peace and blessings. Conway the Machine, God Don't Make Mistakes, 1.